My children's breath froze in the air, and the weight of each winter seemed to crush my chest. "If I fail," she whispered to the biting wind, "it will be the end of us all." Anya, the widow whom the village judged fragile, felt the ground tremble beneath her feet as the hungry howls of 15 polar bears echoed through the icy mountains. Before her, the colossal silhouette of the legendary giant musk ox, a 5,000-kilogram beast, the only hope between her people and certain death. One false step, one breath of hesitation, and eternal winter would cover their lives. But what she was about to do would challenge not only nature, but the very destiny of her tribe. Anya took a deep breath, the icy air burning her lungs, but bringing an unexpected clarity. There was no room for the fear that had assailed her moments before. Now, only determination, cold and sharp as the blades of ice adorning the rocks, guided her steps. She remembered the words of her late husband Boris, spoken on campfire nights, when the wind howled outside and he taught her about the patience of snow and the silent strength of ice. "Anya," he would say, his wise eyes fixed on her, "nature does not bend to brute force, but to the mind that understands it." And the village elders, with their deep wrinkles like maps of winters past, always reinforced. Wisdom is the most powerful weapon, sharper than any spear. With these memories as a protective cloak, Anya raised her chin. Her eyes, once tear-filled from the pain of loss, now shone with a resolute light, sweeping the terrain. The treacherous crevice, mentioned in the premise, was her stage. The legendary giant musk ox, with its thick fur and imposing horns, grazed at a distance, oblivious to her presence, but the 15 polar bears, white and deadly sentinels, had already noticed the intruder. Their deep growls reverberated, a clear warning that would make any experienced hunter retreat. But Anya was no ordinary hunter. She was a mother, a guardian, and the last hope of her people. She observed the bears' arrangement, the way they moved, the implicit hierarchy in their heavy steps. Boris had taught her to read nature's signs, to understand the dance between predator and prey. The bears, though numerous and powerful, had a pattern. They surrounded the musk ox, but maintained a strategic distance from each other, creating a perimeter that, with cunning, could be broken. Anya did not have the strength to face one bear, much less 15, but she had the intelligence to use the environment to her advantage. The ice cracking beneath her feet was not just a danger, but a tool. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched her cold, chapped lips. It was not a smile of joy, but of recognition. She knew what to do. Her gloved fingers tightened around the shaft of her old spear, not like a warrior seeking battle, but like an artisan preparing their work. She crouched, moving with the lightness of a shadow over the compacted snow, her eyes fixed on the weakest point of the bear's formation. The wind whipped her face, but she felt no cold. She felt only the pulse of life, the urgency of her mission. Every fiber of her being was attuned to the environment, to the song of the wind, to the crackle of the ice. The village, her children, the memory of Boris, all of it propelled her. She was a widow, yes, but she was also the embodiment of resilience, ancestral wisdom, and unwavering love. The destiny of her tribe would not be sealed by winter, but by the courage of a woman. She began to move, not towards the bears, but in a calculated arc, using rocky outcrops and depressions in the snow to hide, to deceive. Her plan was daring, relying on the precision of each step and the patience Boris so praised. The crevice was deep, and the ice covering it treacherous. She needed to lure the bears, separate them, and then, with a master stroke, corner the musk ox. The first step was the hardest, to break the deadly silence of winter and attract the attention of the white giants without becoming easy prey. She knew the village watched over her in spirit, and that was the strength that propelled her. Anya slid behind a snowdrift, her heart pounding but her mind clear as ice crystal. She did not possess the thundering voice of a hunter to echo across the vast tundra, nor the brute force to confront the white giants. Her weapon would be subtlety, calculated distraction. With precise and careful movements, she began to gather small stones and loose pieces of ice, not to throw them violently, but to create a sound, a minimal noise that would break the oppressive stillness of winter. She knew that the bears, though imposing, were curious creatures and fiercely protective of their territory and their musk ox. Her goal was not to harm them, but to divert them, one by one or in small groups, away from the main prey. Her eyes fixed on one of the younger bears which patrolled the edge of the crevice, slightly further from the main group. It was the weakest link, the most likely to react to an unexpected and subtle stimulus. With a steady hand and the precision of one who knows every shadow of that environment, Anya threw a small stone, making it ricochet off a distant rock with a dry snap, almost inaudible, but sufficient. The bear raised its heavy head, its nostrils sniffing the icy air, its small dark eyes searching for the source of the mysterious sound. The tension was palpable, each second stretching like an icy eternity, suspended in the rarefied air. Anya remained motionless, her breath almost suspended, mingling with the vapor escaping her mouth. The bear, hesitant, took a few slow steps towards the sound. It was exactly what she expected. It approached the crevice, its colossal weight making the ice groan and crackle with a worrying sound. Anya observed the pattern of cracks forming beneath the animal's paws, a dangerous dance between apparent solidity and treacherous fragility. She needed more. With a quick and calculated movement, she used the tip of her old spear to poke a piece of ice that broke loose, falling into the crevice with a hollow, reverberating sound. The bear stopped, intrigued by the new disturbance, and tilted its head, looking down into the darkness of the crevice. It was the crucial moment. With a low cry, almost a whisper that the wind nearly carried away, Anya emerged from her hiding place, not to attack the bear, but to attract its attention more directly. The animal turned abruptly, surprised by her sudden appearance, and growled, showing teeth sharp as ice daggers. But Anya did not retreat an inch. Her eyes, which had wept so many losses, met the bear's, and for an instant there was a mutual recognition of strength, not brute, destructive force, but the unbreakable strength of will and love. She was not a threat to be destroyed, but a distraction to be pursued. She ran, not away from the panicked bear, but towards a more unstable part of the ice covering the crevice, knowing that the animal would follow her, driven by its territorial instinct and curiosity. The bear pursued her, its heavy steps echoing like muffled thunder in the soft snow. Anya felt the ice crack violently beneath her feet, a sinister warning, but she continued, her movements fluid and calculated, each step a silent prayer. She knew that every crack was an immense risk, but also a unique opportunity. The plan was to lure the bear into an area where the ice would not support its colossal weight, forcing it away from the musk ox, and ideally to become isolated and disoriented. Adrenaline coursed through her veins, but the image of her hungry children and the entire village depending on her was an impenetrable shield against panic. She could not fail, not now. The bear was close, dangerously close. She leapt over a smaller crevice, the ice breaking loudly behind her with a terrifying and definitive sound. The bear, in its fury and blind pursuit, did not perceive the imminent danger until it was too late. With a roar of surprise and frustration, it sank a paw into the yielding ice, trapping it momentarily. It was not seriously injured but disoriented, and now separated from the musk ox and the rest of the pack by an unstable and dangerous ice barrier. Anya looked back, her chest heaving from effort and tension, but a glimpse of hope lit up in her tired eyes. The first bear was out of play, at least for now. The strategy was working, ancestral wisdom proving stronger than brute force, but there were still 14 white giants. She could not rest, not for an instant. Time was her most relentless enemy, and the cold, a constant and cruel companion. The other bears, alerted by the roar of their trapped companion, began to stir, their gazes now more focused and dangerous on her. Anya knew that the next phase of her mission would be even more perilous and demanding. She needed to lure more bears to the crevice, but without putting herself at fatal and irreversible risk. Her thoughts flew to Boris, to the lessons of patience and cunning he had imparted to her. She remembered how he had taught her to observe the wind, to read the tracks in the snow, to feel the earth beneath her feet. That ancestral wisdom, passed down from generation to generation, was now her greatest ally and her shield. She gripped her spear again, ready for the next step of her dangerous dance with the wild. With her heart pounding, but her mind clear, Anya observed the 14 remaining bears. They were no longer dispersed. They formed a protective semicircle around the muskox, their gigantic bodies blocking any easy access. The crevice, with its treacherous ice, remained her only ally. She needed a new distraction, something that would break the group's cohesion without alerting them to her true intention. Her eyes swept the landscape, searching for a detail, a sign. The wind, which had previously whipped, now blew in irregular gusts, raising small snow whirlwinds. An idea began to form in her mind. Boris always said the wind was a messenger, and Anya learned to listen to it. She noticed that one of the strongest gusts was directed towards a group of 3 bears that were closer to each other, at the edge of the semicircle. With an agile movement, she hid behind a rock formation, taking a small piece of hair fur from her pouch that she used to warm her hands. It wasn't a large object, but if used correctly, it could be bait. She waited for the exact moment, the peak of a wind gust. When it came with a precise throw, she tossed the fur in the opposite direction of the crevice, making it glide and fall onto a distant snowdrift. The scent of the hair, even faint, was carried by the wind and caught by the bear's sensitive nostrils. The 3 closest animals raised their heads, sniffing the air. One of them, the largest and apparently the leader of that small group, growled, and its eyes fixed on the direction from which the scent seemed to come. Curiosity, or perhaps hunger, was a powerful instinct. With slow, heavy steps, the 3 bears began to move, distancing themselves from the musk ox and the crevice, following the imaginary trail of the hare. Anya watched, her heart in her throat, but a small smile of satisfaction touched her lips. 3 fewer bears, protecting the main prey. Now, 11 remained. The gap in the semicircle was larger, but the remaining bears seemed more alert, their growls more frequent. Anya knew she couldn't use the same tactic again. They wouldn't fall for the same trick. She needed something more direct, but still without confrontation. The crevice was closer to the muskox now, and the ice thinner. She crouched again, her spear at the ready, not to attack, but to test the ground. With the metal tip, she gently tapped the ice in front of her, feeling the vibration, listening to the subtle cracks. It was like reading a book, each sound a word, each crack a sentence. She found the exact spot, an area where the ice seemed solid, but beneath which there was a cavity, a void that made the surface treacherously fragile. Anya moved with determination, her feet finding the rhythm of the snow, her eyes fixed on an approaching bear, attracted by the sounds she deliberately caused with her spear. She did not flee, she lured it, walking on stronger ice, but always towards the fragile point. The bear, with its imposing mass, followed her, its eyes fixed on the small and daring figure. When Anya felt the ice yield slightly beneath her own feet, she leaped, a quick and graceful movement, onto a piece of solid rock. The bear, blinded by the chase, stepped exactly on the spot Anya had prepared. With a deafening crash, the ice broke into 1,000 pieces, and the white giant sank not into the deep crevice, but into a pit of ice and snow, trapped up to its chest. It roared, furious and disoriented, struggling to free itself, but the surrounding ice was too unstable to offer support. Anya watched, her chest rising and falling rapidly. Another bear was out of action, and without serious injury, just trapped and prevented from protecting the muskox. Boris's cunning and the elder's wisdom were guiding her every step. 10 bears remained, and the muskox was closer than ever. Hope, fragile as ice, began to solidify. With her heart pounding but her mind clear, Anya observed the 10 remaining bears. They had tightened the circle around the muskox, their deep growls making the air vibrate. The crevice, with its cracks and traps, was her only sanctuary. She needed a new tactic, without an olfactory distraction or an obvious weak point. Her eyes scanned the white expanse, searching for a new move. The giant muskox, oblivious to the battle, grazed, its presence the promise of life for the village. Anya noticed a snow elevation, almost a dune, that ended abruptly at the edge of the crevice near 3 bears. It was a blind spot, ideal for amplifying sound. With her spear, she moved with the agility of a winter spirit, crawling, using every shadow to hide. Her muscles ached, but the image of her hungry children was a balm. She reached the dune, trembling from the cold and tension. With a precise movement, Anya plunged her spear into the snow of the dune at the edge of the crevice. With force, she pushed, making snow and blocks of ice collapse noisily. The sound, amplified by the echo, was a small thunder. The 3 nearby bears, surprised, rose up, growling and sniffing, searching for the source. They approached the edge, curious. Anya, hidden, watched. The bears, with their colossal weights, leaned over the edge of the crevice. The ice, weakened, yielded with sharp cracks. Not a total collapse, but enough for one bear to lose its balance, falling onto an ice platform below, trapped. The other 2, startled, retreated abruptly, stumbling and moving away from the danger, their growls mixed with grunts of alarm. Anya took a deep breath, a sigh in a cloud of vapor. 3 fewer bears, trapped or driven away. 7 remained. The tension lessened, replaced by determination. She was succeeding one step at a time. Boris's wisdom, the elder's patience, her love for her children, all transformed her from a fragile widow into a cunning hunter. The muskox was more accessible, the bear barrier reduced. But the remaining 7 were the most vigilant. The next step would require more audacity and precision. She knew the crevice was her last resort and greatest ally. The remaining bears formed an almost impenetrable wall. Anya needed a final move to disperse them and corner the muskox. Her eyes landed on an area of the crevice where the ice seemed thinner, almost translucent, a window to the darkness below. It was an immense risk, but the hunger in the village was greater. She stood up, her small figure contrasting with the white immensity, and walked towards the muskox to lure the bears to the most fragile point of the ice. The 7 bears saw her. Their growls intensified, and they began to pursue her directly. Anya ran, her feet barely touching the ice, her eyes fixed on the translucent point. She felt the ice groan under the weight of the bears, each step an omen. With a final effort, she leaped over the thinnest point, landing safely. The ice behind her did not hold. With a deafening crash, the surface broke, creating an insurmountable barrier. The bears, furious, were trapped on the other side of the crevice, separated from the musk ox and Anya. The path was clear. Anya was alone, facing the legendary giant musk ox. The silence contrasted with the echoes of the trapped bears. Her eyes fixed on the colossal 5,000-kilogram creature, majestic in its thick fur. One false move would be fatal. The tremor in her hands was not from fear, but from the magnitude of the task. Her children and the village depended on this moment. Ancestral wisdom, taught by Boris and the elders, was her shield. Anya took a deep breath, the vapor freezing on her lips. The spear seemed insignificant. She could not attack head-on. She needed a weak point. Her eyes swept the terrain. The crevice, her ally, extended in a semicircle. The muskox grazed near the edge, oblivious to the danger. An idea, born of observation, crystallized. The muskox's weight exerted pressure on the ice. Anya noticed small cracks where the animal rested a front paw. It was an invisible fragility, an invitation to cunning. With her spear at the ready, she moved in a gentle arc. Her steps were light, a whisper on the snow. The muskox watched her, slightly turning its head without aggression. She needed it to step on that exact spot. She stopped at a safe distance and with the tip of her spear scraped the ice, creating a sharp sound. The sensitive muskox raised its head, searching for the noise. Anya repeated, closer, louder. Annoyed, the animal took a step forward, stepping on the fragile spot. The ice groaned, a larger crack snaked. The muskox felt the instability and recoiled. The wound in the ice was open. Anya knew it was the moment. Without hesitation, with a mother's cry, she ran towards the muskox, not to attack it, but to frighten it, to force it into an abrupt movement. The muskox, caught by surprise, reacted instinctively. It lowered its head to charge, but Anya moved with agility. She aimed not for the body, but for its point of support. With a precise and calculated strike of the spear, she hit the edge of the crack, just as the muskox rested its paw. The ice yielded, unbalancing the beast. The muskox, with a grunt of surprise, lost its footing, its hind legs slipping. It did not fall into the crevice, but partially sank, trapped in a depression of ice and snow. Anya's spear, driven by will and knowledge, found a vital spot at the base of its neck. It was a clean, decisive blow that ended the struggle. The muskox, with a last breath, fell silent. Anya watched, her chest heaving, tears streaming down her frozen face, of relief and exhaustion. The colossal beast lay there, a promise of salvation for her village. She had succeeded. Winter would no longer be a death sentence. Anya observed the muskox, a giant silenced by her will, and a wave of emotions washed over her. The tears, previously of relief and exhaustion, now mingled with deep gratitude. She had succeeded. Winter would no longer be a death sentence for her village. Her knees gave way, and she fell into the snow, not from weakness, but from the weight of responsibility that finally dissipated. The icy air burned her lungs, but she felt no cold. She felt only the faint warmth of rekindled hope. The image of her children, hungry and fragile, filled her mind, and a genuine, long-forgotten smile lit up her wind-chapped face. Boris, her beloved Boris, would have been proud. She could almost feel his hand on her shoulder, a touch of approval. But the joy was short-lived. The cruel reality of Yakutia soon brought her back. The muskox was there, yes, a mountain of meat and hide, but how to transport it? Her eyes scanned the vast expanse of the tundra, the ice and snow stretching to the horizon. She was alone, many kilometers from the village, and the animal weighed 5,000 kilograms. It was an impossible weight for a single person, even for the strongest hunter. A new knot of worry tightened in her chest. The hunt had been a miracle, but the logistics of bringing the prey home seemed another insurmountable challenge. Anya tried to move one of the muskox's legs, but it was like trying to move a mountain. Her muscles, already exhausted by the chase and confrontation, protested with sharp pains. She knew it was useless. Leaving the muskox there, however, was unthinkable. The bears, though dispersed and trapped, could return, or other predators would be attracted by the smell of blood. The meat would freeze quickly, making cutting and transport even more difficult, almost impossible without proper tools. She needed help, and she needed it fast. The decision was painful, but inevitable. She would have to return to the village, ask for help, and leave her precious prey vulnerable for a few hours. The risk was immense, but there was no other choice. Her eyes fixed on the muskox, a promise of life that now seemed as fragile as the ice beneath her feet. "I will return," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion and urgency. "I promise." While Anya made her difficult decision, in the village, the flame of hope seemed to diminish with each passing hour. The sun, barely rising above the horizon, was already beginning to set, painting the sky in pale shades of orange and purple, announcing the harshness of the night. Inside the main tent, the elders were gathered, their faces wrinkled with worry and hunger. The silence was heavy, broken only by the crackling of the fire and the occasional cry of a hungry child. Anya's grandmother, a woman of wisdom and resilience, tried to calm her grandchildren, little Misha and Lena, who huddled close to her, their large, curious eyes fixed on the tent's entrance. "Your mother is strong," she repeated, more to herself than to the children, her voice a thread of hope. "She will return." But doubt hung in the air like frozen vapor. No one had ever hunted a giant musk ox, much less a woman alone, and amidst 15 polar bears, words of discouragement began to emerge, whispered among the younger ones about the impossibility of the task. "Perhaps we should have sent the strongest men," said a young hunter, his voice full of regret. "Anya is brave, but—" He didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone understood what he meant. Anya's fragility, her inexperience in large-scale hunts, was a heavy burden on everyone's mind. Anya, oblivious to the despair that was beginning to grip her community, was already on her way back. Each step was a battle against the exhaustion that threatened to fell her. The wind, which had previously guided her, now seemed to push her back, a constant reminder of winter's vastness and cruelty. Her feet ached, her muscles protested, but she continued, driven by the image of her children's hungry faces. She knew every minute was precious. The muskox needed to be transported before night fell completely and predators became bolder. The urgency of her mission was a fire that kept her warm, even as the cold tried to penetrate her bones. She thought of Boris again, of how he had taught her never to give up, to always find a solution, no matter how difficult the situation. This wisdom, this resilience, was the true legacy he had left her. She pressed her lips together, determination etched on her face. She had not overcome the bears and the muskox to fail now. The village needed her, and she would not disappoint them. Daylight was fading fast, and the shadows of night began to stretch over the icy tundra, promising even more intense cold and dangerous encounters. Anya knew time was running out, and with each step, the pressure mounted. She needed to reach the village, gather help, and return before darkness swallowed her victory. Anya continued her race against time, each step a sharp pain radiating through her exhausted legs. The wind howled in her ears, a ghostly chorus that seemed to mock her fragility. Darkness advanced rapidly, swallowing the last brushstrokes of light on the horizon and transforming the white landscape into a sea of indistinct shadows. She pressed her lips together, the cold cutting her skin, but the image of Misha and Lena's hungry faces was a warmth that propelled her. She could not stop, dared not. The promise of meat and life for the village lay vulnerable on the tundra, and she was the only bridge between hope and annihilation. In the main tent, Anya's grandmother held Misha and Lena close, her wrinkled arms offering the only solace amidst the growing despair. The fire crackled low, its flames dancing faintly, unable to warm the atmosphere of apprehension. The elders' murmurs grew darker. "She won't return with the muskox," one of them said, his voice hoarse with hunger and discouragement. "It's impossible. No one has ever succeeded." The grandmother gave him a stern look, her eyes tear-filled but firm. "Anya is different," She has Boris's strength and the wisdom of our ancestors. She will return. Misha, with his large, frightened eyes, tugged at his grandmother's sleeve. "Grandma, I'm hungry. Will Mama bring food?" The innocent question cut the air like a blade, reinforcing the urgency of the situation. The grandmother hugged him tighter, feeling the fragility of the small bodies. Meanwhile, Anya stumbled on an ice ledge, almost falling. Her knees buckled, and for an instant the temptation to surrender was almost overwhelming. But then, the mental image of her children, their pale faces and eyes full of expectation, lifted her up. She took a deep breath, the icy air burning her lungs, and continued. With each meter, the darkness deepened, and the cold became more penetrating. She could feel her fingers and toes beginning to lose sensation, a dangerous sign of frostbite. The spear, which had once seemed an extension of her body, was now a cumbersome weight in her numb hand. Finally, a faint light appeared on the horizon. The village. A sigh of relief escaped her chapped lips, and a new wave of energy propelled her. She quickened her pace, the sight of the main tent becoming clearer with each moment. Voices, previously distant, began to distinguish themselves, a hum of worry and waiting. When Anya stumbled into the village perimeter, her grandmother's figure was the first to see her, standing at the entrance of the main tent, her fragile silhouette against the flickering firelight. A muffled cry escaped the elder woman's lips. Anya ran to her, her eyes fixed on her children, who were now approaching, their steps hesitant. Misha and Lena hugged her tightly, their small hands clutching her frozen clothes. Anya knelt, embracing them, feeling the warmth of their bodies, and the tears she had held back for so long finally streamed down, freezing on her cheeks. "I did it," she whispered, her voice hoarse and choked. "The muskox. It's there, but I need help. We need to go get it now, before the night takes it." Her voice, though weak, carried an undeniable urgency and a determination that silenced the murmurs of doubt in the village. The elders approached, their faces previously grim, now filled with a mixture of shock and cautious hope. The news spread like wildfire. The miracle had happened. Anya's news, a whisper of hope, quickly turned into a clamor in the village. The elders, previously bowed by discouragement, straightened up, their eyes fixed on the exhausted figure of the widow. The initial shock gave way to a wave of disbelief, followed by a spark of hope they hadn't seen in a long time. A young hunter, the same one who had doubted, was the first to move. He approached Anya, his eyes wide, and asked, his voice choked, "Is it true, Anya? The muskox? You did it?" Anya nodded, unable to speak more than the essential, but the firmness in her gaze was the answer. Anya's grandmother, with Misha and Lena still clinging to her, felt such intense relief that her legs almost gave way. She hugged her grandchildren, tears streaming freely now, not from sadness, but from an overwhelming joy. "She was always strong," she murmured, her voice trembling. "Always." The other villagers who had gathered around began to stir. Hunger and cold had drained their energies, but the promise of food, of life, injected new strength into their tired bodies. "We need to go now," Anya managed to say, her voice hoarse. "Night is falling. The bears. Other predators might arrive." The urgency in her words was undeniable. There was no time for celebrations, only for action. The older men, even weakened, began to gather their tools, knives and rudimentary sleds. The women, with a new sparkle in their eyes, prepared the warmest furs for the journey. Old Boris, one of the most respected elders, approached Anya. He placed a wrinkled hand on her shoulder, his eyes full of deep respect. "You are the strength of our village, Anya. The wisdom of your ancestors lives in you." He didn't need to say more. Anya felt a warmth spread through her chest, a validation that propelled her forward. Leaving Misha and Lena in her grandmother's care, Anya prepared for the return journey. Every muscle in her body protested, but the image of the muskox, giant and inert, was a beacon. She knew the task of transporting it would be monumental, but now she was not alone. The entire village, invigorated by hope, was with her. The group, composed of 10 men and some stronger women, set off under the pale light of the crescent moon. The cold was biting, more intense than before, and the darkness made each step a gamble. Anya led the way, her sharp memory guiding them through the relentless tundra. The silence of the night was broken only by the crunch of snow beneath their feet and the distant howl of the wind. With each kilometer, apprehension grew. Would the musk ox still be there? Would some predator have found it? Anya's mind was on high alert, her eyes scanning the dark horizon for any sign of danger. Finally, after hours of exhausting trek, the colossal silhouette of the muskox emerged in the darkness, a dark mountain against the snow. A collective sigh of relief and admiration escaped the villagers' lips. It was real. Anya had achieved the impossible. The sight of the animal, larger than any of them had ever seen, was living proof of Anya's resilience and the faith she had restored in her community. Winter, for a moment, seemed less cruel and the future less grim. The sight of the colossal musk ox, majestic even in its death, brought a wave of emotions that swept away the villagers' tiredness and cold. A reverent silence hung for an instant, broken only by the distant howl of the wind. It was a miracle, a mountain of life that Anya had snatched from winter's grasp. The men and women approached, their eyes fixed on the creature and then on Anya, who stood exhausted, but with an unwavering glint in her eyes. Boris, the elder, was the first to kneel beside the animal, touching its thick fur with an almost sacred respect. "Anya," he said, his voice choked with emotion, "you brought us back from the brink of the abyss." Other villagers murmured in agreement. Their faces previously marked by despair, now illuminated by a new light. The women, with tears in their eyes, embraced Anya, conveying in their gestures all the gratitude that words could not express. But there was no time for prolonged celebrations. Night advanced, and the cold intensified, threatening to freeze the meat before it could be properly processed. Anya, though exhausted, knew the hardest task was yet to come. "We need to work fast," she announced, her voice still hoarse but full of authority. "The muskox is large, and the cold does not wait." The men, led by Boris and the young hunter who had previously doubted, began to organize. Knives, sharpened with care before departure, were drawn from their sheaths. The women prepared the hides and sleds, ready to receive the meat. The air was imbued with a mixture of urgency and renewed enthusiasm. Anya, with the wisdom she had learned from Boris and her late husband, began to give instructions. She pointed out the best places to start cutting, explaining how to preserve the hide and internal organs, which would also be valuable. Her gestures were precise, her voice calm, and the villagers listened to her with an attention they had never dedicated to a woman on a hunt. Prejudice, once an invisible barrier, had dissolved before her courage and success. The work began. It was a Herculean effort. The meat, already beginning to stiffen with the cold, required strength and technique. The men took turns, their muscles tense and sweating, even under layers of clothing. The women helped separate the parts, carefully organizing them on the hides for transport. Vapor escaped their mouths with each exhalation, forming dense clouds in the icy air. Anya did not stop. She supervised, assisted, and even took a knife to demonstrate the correct technique when necessary. Her fingers, though sore, moved with surprising dexterity. She thought of Misha and Lena, of her grandmother, and of all the hungry faces in the village. Each piece of meat was a promise of life, a victory over despair. The young hunter, whose name was Sergei, approached Anya, his eyes full of admiration. "Anya," he said, his voice low, "I doubted you. Forgive me. Anya merely smiled, a tired but warm smile. There is nothing to forgive, Sergei. Doubt is natural when hope fades. The important thing is that we are together now. Solidarity was palpable. The biting cold and the darkness of night were no longer invincible enemies, but challenges to be overcome by unity. The muskox, which had once represented an impossible threat, was now the link that united them, proof that the resilience of the human spirit could triumph over the cruelest nature. Hours passed, and the moon was already high in the sky, illuminating the scene of arduous work and renewed hope. Half of the muskox had already been carefully cut and loaded onto the sleds, which now weighed tons. The return to the village would be slow and exhausting, but no one complained. The sight of the meat piled and protected was the reward for every effort. Anya looked up at the starry sky, feeling the weight of gratitude and responsibility. The journey was not yet over, but the village was saved. The future, which had once seemed an icy void, now filled with promises. The moon rose higher in the sky, its pale glow barely piercing the dense darkness that enveloped the tundra. The work continued, tireless under Anya's watchful eye. Each cut into the muskox's meat was an act of faith, each piece loaded onto the sleds a promise of life. The villagers, previously exhausted by hunger and despair, now found a strength that seemed to spring from the frozen ground itself. Their movements were slow but determined, their faces marked by cold and effort, but illuminated by renewed hope. Sergei, the young hunter, worked alongside Anya, his eyes fixed on her with an admiration he no longer tried to hide. He had apologized, and Anya had forgiven him with a smile, but the lesson was etched in his heart. He observed how she, despite visible exhaustion, kept her mind clear, guiding each step, each movement, ensuring no valuable piece was wasted. Anya's spear, which had brought down the beast, now lay in the snow, a silent testament to her courage. Elder Boris, with his wrinkled hands, helped tie the hides full of meat to the sleds. He looked at Anya, and in his gaze was the recognition of a legend being born. "Your husband would be proud, Anya," he murmured, his voice hoarse, "and our ancestors too." Anya merely nodded, a lump in her throat. The memory of Boris, her Boris, was a warmth that kept her standing. Finally, the last portion of the muskox was loaded. The sleds, heavy with thousands of kilograms of meat, barely moved in the deep snow. The journey back would be even more challenging. The cold, already intense, seemed to deepen, and the wind began to howl with more force, raising snowflakes that whipped their faces. "Let's go," Anya said, her voice a little stronger now, driven by urgency. "We need to get back before the blizzard worsens." The villagers positioned themselves, some pulling the sleds with ropes tied to their shoulders, others pushing from behind. It was a collective effort, each contributing what they could. The sleds creaked and groaned, carving a slow and painful path through the untouched snow. Each step was a struggle, each meter gained, a victory. Anya led the group, breaking the trail, her eyes fixed in the direction of the village. The darkness was almost total, and the falling snow hampered visibility, transforming the landscape into a white and grey blur. She knew the danger had not completely passed. The bears, though dispersed, could be nearby, attracted by the smell of blood or other hungry predators. Suddenly, one of the sleds, the heaviest, sank into a snow depression, getting stuck. The men pulling it slipped, falling into the snow. A murmur of discouragement spread through the group. Exhaustion was taking its toll. Anya turned, assessing the situation. "Don't give up!" she exclaimed, her voice ringing with an authority that surprised everyone, including herself. "Together, we will move it." She approached the sled and with a gesture indicated where the men should push and where others should pull. She herself positioned herself, putting the full weight of her body against the sled, her muscles trembling with the effort. The others, seeing her unwavering determination, gathered their last strengths. With a unison cry, they pushed and pulled, and slowly the sled began to move again, freeing itself from the snow trap. The relief was palpable, but the lesson clear. The journey would be long and full of obstacles. The cold penetrated their clothes, and the wind seemed to want to steal their breath, freezing the tears that stubbornly welled in the corners of their eyes. Darkness was a heavy blanket, but each one's determination was a small flame. But the image of Misha and Lena, of her grandmother, and of all the hungry faces in the village was an unbreakable shield against despair. They continued one step at a time, a community united against the relentless fury of winter. With each step, Anya felt her connection to her people strengthen, the certainty that true strength did not reside in a single individual, but in the invisible web of support and love that united them. The village awaited them, and they would bring the promise of life home, not just in meat, but also in the unwavering resilience of their spirits. The blizzard, once a distant threat, was now a relentless fury, swallowing the landscape in a white and icy whirlwind. The wind howled with intensity, seeming to tear at the soul, whipping sharp snowflakes against their faces and penetrating to the bone. The sleds, heavy with the promise of life, barely dragged through the snow, each movement a groan of wood and ice. Anya led, her eyes squinted against the storm, relying more on the memory of the terrain than on almost non-existent vision. Muscles screamed in protest. Each breath was a cutting pain, but she could not stop. The image of Misha and Lena's hungry faces, of her grandmother, was a beacon guiding her through the darkness. Behind her, the villagers struggled. Sergei, with his red face and chapped lips, pulled one of the heaviest sleds, his shoulders hunched under the effort. He looked at Anya, at the determined silhouette in the blizzard, feeling admiration and shame for his doubts. Boris, the elder, pushed with surprising strength, his eyes fixed on the ground, a silent mantra of hope. The women helped, offering encouragement muffled by the wind. Every few meters they stopped, exhausted, bodies trembling, but Anya's firm gaze propelled them. The cold was unbearable, an invisible enemy that stole sensation. The urgency of the mission, however, was greater than any pain. They knew that the village's life depended on every piece of meat, on every step. Solidarity was the only thing that kept them warm, the certainty of not being alone. Suddenly, a shout. One of the men had slipped on a treacherous ice patch, falling and dragging the sled rope with him. The sled, out of control, began to slide dangerously towards a small ravine. Panic threatened to take over. Anya reacted instantly. "Hold on!" she cried, her voice surprisingly strong. She ran to the sled, ignoring the pain, and with agility grabbed one of the ropes. With all her strength, she braced herself, her feet digging into the ice, muscles tense. Sergei and Boris, seeing her determination, ran to help, grabbing other ropes, and together, with superhuman effort, they stopped the sled at the edge of the precipice. The man was helped to his feet, pale with fright and exhaustion. Anya looked at everyone, her eyes conveying a clear message. There was no room for despair. "We're close," she lied gently, hope being the necessary fuel. "Together we will make it." The confidence in her voice was contagious. They reorganized. The incident, a cruel reminder of life's fragility. The path seemed endless, darkness and blizzard merging into an impenetrable wall. Deep exhaustion nestled in their bones. Anya, feeling the weight of responsibility and the strength of her people, continued to advance. This was the climax, the struggle to bring life back home. The cold was a deadly embrace, the wind a whisper of surrender. But with each step, they wove the tapestry of their resilience. Suddenly, through the white veil of the blizzard, a faint light flickered on the horizon. One, then another. The village, A collective sigh of relief and a wave of renewed energy swept through the group. The tears, which the cold had frozen, now streamed warm and salty, a silent testament to their victory. Winter had tried to steal everything, but they, united, had prevailed. The village lights, once so distant and uncertain, now grew in intensity, transforming into flickering bonfires and the silhouettes of the tents. A new breath, driven by the sight of home, invaded each of the villagers. Exhaustion was still deep, but hope, now a burning flame, guided their steps. Anya, with her heart pounding in her chest, felt warm tears stream freely, no longer freezing, but washing away the pain and fear that had accompanied her for so long. She turned to the group, a tired but radiant smile illuminating her face. "We've arrived," she whispered, and the word echoed like a fulfilled promise. The first to see them were the women and children, who waited anxiously at the village entrance. Anya's grandmother, with Misha and Lena nestled in her arms, let out a cry of joy that mingled with the howl of the wind. The children, upon seeing their mother, ran, their small bodies throwing themselves against Anya's legs. She knelt, hugging them with all the strength she had left, feeling the warmth and sweet scent of her children, a reward greater than anything. "Mama!" Lena whimpered, and Misha, his eyes red from crying, just squeezed her tighter. The sleds, loaded with the colossal muskox meat, were slowly pulled to the center of the village. The sight of the mountain of food brought a reverent silence, followed by a murmur of admiration and gratitude. Hunger, which had been a constant shadow, began to dissipate. Boris, the elder, approached Anya, his eyes moist with tears. He said nothing, just placed his wrinkled hand over hers, a gesture worth more than 1,000 words. Sergei, the young hunter, knelt before her, his head bowed in a sign of respect. "Anya," he said, his voice choked with emotion, "you saved us. You are our legend." The entire village mobilized. The fire was stoked. Pots and cauldrons were set to boil. The meat, carefully cut, began to be prepared. The smell of cooking food, once a distant dream, now filled the air, warming not only their bodies, but also their spirits. The children, their eyes shining with anticipation, watched every movement, while the adults worked with renewed energy, certain that winter would not defeat them. In the main tent, Anya, Misha and Lena sat near the fire, their grandmother serving them a steaming bowl of meat broth. The first sip was like a balm, warming them from the inside out. Anya watched her children, their faces previously pale, now flushed with warmth and joy. That was her miracle, the true victory. She had challenged the impossible, not for personal glory, but for the unconditional love for her family and community. The days that followed were of arduous work, but also of celebration. The muskox meat was divided, part of it cooked and consumed immediately, part salted and dried to ensure sustenance throughout the rest of the winter. The hides were carefully treated, promising warmth and protection. The village, once on the brink of collapse, was reborn, stronger and more united than ever. Anya was no longer just a widow. She was the hunter of the giant muskox, a living legend whose name would be whispered with reverence by future generations. Prejudice against her strength and wisdom had melted away like snow in the sun. She had proven that true strength resided not only in physical brutality, but in intelligence, the resilience of the spirit, and the love that drives the bravest acts. Yakutia continued to be a place of relentless challenges, with its 71° and eternal blizzards. But now, Anya's village had an unwavering shield, not only in the abundance of food, but in the hope and unity she had rekindled. Winter was still cruel, but they had found a way to survive, to prosper, and to remember that, even in the most extreme conditions, the human spirit could shine brighter than ice. Anya, sitting beside her children, watching the village vibrate with life, felt a deep peace. Her husband, would have been proud, and she, more than ever, knew she had fulfilled her promise. Anya, sitting beside her children, watching the village vibrate with life, felt a deep peace. Her husband would have been proud, and she, more than ever, knew she had fulfilled her promise. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The merciless winter of Yakutia continued to test the village with its icy temperatures and endless blizzards, but the shadow of hunger had been banished. The meat of the giant muskox, carefully stored and rationed, ensured that no one went hungry. The hides, transformed into warm and resistant garments, protected everyone from the biting cold, and the bones, skillfully worked, became tools and utensils, a testament to the abundance Anya had brought. The village was no longer the same. The despair that had once weighed on every face had been replaced by a silent resilience, a certainty that together they could face any adversity. The bonfires crackled brighter, children's laughter echoed with more freedom, and the murmurs of nightly conversations carried a tone of renewed optimism. Anya, the hunter of the giant musk ox, carried her new title with humility, but also with an unwavering dignity. She did not seek glory, but the life of her people. Her role in the community had changed profoundly. The men, previously reluctant to listen to a woman, now sought her for advice, respecting her wisdom and her vision. Sergei, the young hunter, became her most faithful apprentice, absorbing every word and every gesture, determined to honor the lesson she had taught him. He saw in Anya not just a hunter, but a born leader, whose strength came from a place deeper than muscles. Boris, the elder, observed Anya with a sparkle in his eyes. He knew the village had found not only food, but a new heart. In their nightly gatherings, he spoke of Anya's courage, of how she had challenged not only nature, but also the old traditions that limited the spirit. Anya showed us that strength has no gender, he would say, his voice hoarse with emotion. She taught us that true wisdom lies in listening to one's heart and protecting those we love, no matter the cost. Misha and Lena grew up under the shadow of their legendary mother, but also under the warmth of her constant love. They saw her as the mother who saved them, the heroine who brought light back into their lives. The stories of the hunt were told and retold around the bonfires, and they listened with wide eyes, learning about courage, sacrifice, and the importance of never giving up. Anya made sure to teach them not only the lessons of hunting and survival, but also the importance of compassion and unity. The giant muskox became more than just a source of food. It became a symbol of the village's resilience, a tangible reminder that hope could flourish even in the heart of the harshest winter. Its enormous footprints, now covered by new layers of snow, were a legend that spread across the icy tundras, inspiring other communities not to succumb to despair. Anya, at the end of each day, sat with her children and grandmother, the warmth of the fire warming their faces. She looked at Misha and Lena, at the future she had secured, and felt the legacy of her husband and her ancestors flow through her. Yakutia would continue to be a challenge, but Anya's village was ready. They had found their unwavering shield, not in a weapon or a fortress, but in the strength of their bonds, in the wisdom that transcends time, and in the unwavering belief in the human spirit. The eternal winter was still there, but now they knew that life would always find a way to flourish, driven by love and unwavering courage. The eternal winter was still there, but now they knew that life would always find a way to flourish, driven by love and unwavering courage. Anya's village, once on the brink of the abyss, transformed into a beacon of hope in the vast and relentless tundra. Temperatures continued to plummet to terrifying levels, and blizzards swept the landscape with fury, but the community had found a new way to keep warm, the warmth of their unity and the unquenchable flame of resilience. Each day was a test, but also a silent celebration of life. Anya, the hunter of the giant muskox, did not become a distant figure. On the contrary, her presence was the foundation of daily life. She shared her ancestral wisdom not only about hunting, but about life in Yakutia, about how to read nature's signs, prepare food to last, and keep the spirit strong in the face of adversity. Her hands, once firm on the spear, now guided younger hands in the making of fur clothing, the repair of tents, and the meticulous organization of supplies. Sergei, the young hunter, was a constant shadow beside Anya. He observed her with a reverence that went beyond respect for a leader. It was admiration for a master. Under her tutelage, Sergei not only honed his hunting skills, but also learned the importance of patience, keen observation, and compassion. He became a vital link between Anya and the other hunters, transmitting her teachings with dedication and a sparkle in his eyes. Boris, the elder, smiled more frequently. His eyes, once heavy with worry, now shone with the satisfaction of seeing his village flourish. He and Anya spent hours talking by the fire, exchanging stories, and wisdom passed down from generation to generation. Boris recognized that the village had been saved not only by the musk ox meat, but by the silent revolution Anya had initiated, breaking old barriers and showing that the strength of the human spirit knew no bounds. Misha and Lena grew strong and curious, with a vitality that had once seemed impossible. They ran through the village, their laughter echoing in the tents, a sound that had once been rare and almost forgotten. Their grandmother, with a serene smile, told them stories of their mother, not as fairy tales, but as life lessons, teaching them about Anya's unwavering courage, unconditional love, and the importance of caring for one another. They saw their mother not just as the legend, but as the woman who, with a hug and a gentle look, gave them security and love every day. With each dawn, Anya watched the pale sun rise over the icy landscape. The cold was still a constant reminder of life's fragility, but no longer an invincible enemy. She saw the village awaken, steam rising from the chimneys, figures moving with purpose. Life continued, a living testament to her struggle and her victory. The village had learned that true wealth was not in material abundance, but in unbreakable unity, generous sharing, and mutual belief that strengthened them. The stories of the hunter of the giant musk ox spread beyond the village limits, carried by traders and travelers. Other communities facing their own harsh winters began to hear about the woman who had challenged the impossible and won. Anya's legend was not just about an extraordinary hunt, but about an individual's ability to inspire an entire community to find its own inner strength and persevere. She had become a symbol of hope, a reminder that, even in the most extreme conditions, the human spirit could flourish and triumph. Anya, at the end of a long day, sat with her children, the warmth of the cozy fire enveloping them. She felt Lena's small hand in hers, the weight of Misha's head on her shoulder. The future, once uncertain, now seemed a path to be walked with confidence. Her husband's legacy lived in her, in the village, and in every heart she had touched. Yakutia continued to be a relentless challenge, but Anya's village was ready to face it. They had found their unwavering shield in the strength of their bonds, in the wisdom that transcends time, and in the unwavering belief in the human spirit forever.